Hello, everyone. Welcome to Pharmaceutical Soccer. Here after a very busy Nashville soccer week, of course. I believe we all had some pretty busy weekends as well with match stuff and during the week going on. I know Valero was looking fancy in his finest suit last night at an Oscar party. So, Valero, what's up, man? How's the weekend? How are things?
It was a good weekend. It's a good stuff. Good all around. Really busy. It's the last couple of weeks. Nashville SC coming back into play, and we're doing some stuff with kicking this 615. And of course, I still have a job, so there's a lot going on.
What?
um, so it's just been really busy. But we had a good weekend. I got to see Clay on a Saturday. That's Saturday night at that. So that was special. I don't often get to do that.
A rare chance
So
to see me do karaoke, which doesn't happen very often.
I also got to see Clay do karaoke, which was rather entertaining.
What did Clay sing?
You had to be there for it, I think.
See, this is the stuff that we need on our Patreon, though. Like this is like
Yeah,
the
yeah,
random video of Clay singing
No,
karaoke is what we need on our.
yeah.
This is what the people want to see, Clay. All right.
no.
Anyway, Clay, I can't tell you what he performed. I'll let him say it if he wants to. But I will say that wholeheartedly and definitively, Clay had the best performance of the night. And we saw a lot of people perform.
We get
Um,
5 people to sign up for the Patreon. We will post a video of Clay on the Patreon singing this song this week. So just an FYI. If we
yeah,
get
just like
one sign up, I'll post all the old videos I have of Valère singing karaoke on the
oh,
Patreon.
it's out there. It's out there. Sadly, it's out there. Unfortunately, it's out there. And then Sunday was obviously Nashville SC game day, but I had to rush right after the game to go to the Bell Court, which obviously they do great work for arts and films in the area. And they I like movies, so I get to watch movies there sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes. And I'm not like a like I don't think I'm a movie buff. Like I'll never explain myself as that, but like I do like movies, and this is an opportunity where I got to dress up fancy and go eat and drink and watch the Oscars. So shout out to the Bell Court for that. And yeah, I've been meaning to do it for a few years, so I'm glad we got to do it. I had a great time. I was exhausted by the end of Sunday. Like I just went home and crashed. It was a long weekend.
I had a solid two-job week because I was working both my real job and my stats job all week last week with TSSAA high school championships, which will continue this week. So basically, my job consisted of sitting there and doing stats and then watching teenage girls cry. And so I did that for like 4 days. And then yeah, I sang a heartfelt ballad called Peaches from the Super Mario movie. And I may or may not have lost my voice. I also did I'll Make a Man Out of You with my wife on stage. So two Disney ones. Unfortunately, the Disney one was followed up by some guy doing Killing in the Name of, which was an interesting transition.
Amazing. God, I love
He
her.
was really into that song, like scary into that song. Um, but anyway, yeah, very, very long weekend of lots of work and not so much work stuff. But you know who also had a long weekend, guys?
Who's that?
Probably the social media team for National Soccer Club.
Shout out to the admins out there. You're
Hey
doing your
guys,
best.
my weekend was good. It was long too. Just if it mattered to anybody that listens to this show, my weekend was good. Not as exciting as theirs, but yeah, social media manager definitely went through a lot over the week. We just kind of want to get it out of the way, just to kind of go through it, just so we don't have to talk about it. I mean, I'm sure we'll be talking about it later down the line. But before the matches started this week, there was definitely some controversy when it came to the seated supporter section, which was advertised as the seated supporter section on the website, which then turned to nah, JK. This is not actually on the website. This is a general supporter section for everybody involved, which is just unfortunately not true. When it was talked about, it was talked about as kind of a seated supporter section. I remember going through it even last year from the supporter side of things. If there's an example of a non-good way to handle an issue, I think NSC hit it just directly on like absolutely knocked this out of the park.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a multi-pronged thing, right? It's the team not competing for the Open Cup, which doesn't matter to a lot of people, but it matters to the people it does matter to. It matters a lot. I, of course, am one of those people. Then you add in the ticket prices being taken up 4 to 6 times for most people for the Inter Miami game. And then you take into account this thing that was we were sold was a one bill of goods, was actually told it was something else. And I think any one of these things could have been taken pretty negatively by a good chunk of the fan base. But all three of these things happening, and honestly, the part that really makes me uncomfortable, and this is the part that I talked about online, is just the lack of honesty. Like, I think that if you say, look, we're saying seated supporter section, that's hard to police from the way that we want to do it. These are seated sections that we will market towards supporters. I think people would be fine with that. I don't think they'd like it, but I think they'd come around to that. But if that comes out the week that you jacked up prices on all the supporters, then it reads a different way. And I think, and it makes sense to you would be understanding. But the fact that you go through and say it was mistakenly labeled a supporter section when it was on your website, when it was in your emails, when it was sold to all of us literally as a quote seated supporter section, that's when people look at it differently and say, no, you aren't even owning the mistake you made. You're putting it on everyone else for misunderstanding what you said when literally what you said is what they're upset about. Like that's just I'm not going to get into the whole gaslighting thing because I think that that's a more long-standing form of like emotional abuse and things like that. I think that that's a little bit strong, but they did mislead their supporters, and if they're going to come back and say they didn't, then it's hard to read it as anything other than being willingly misleading to their supporters, and to do it in a week when a lot of us were assured that we would have a good chance at getting Miami tickets not marked up 400 to 600%. It just the whole week just left me feeling really icky about supporter relations between the club and the supporters in a way that I hadn't felt in a long time. And as someone who's been around for a long time and knows the history of it and what it all comes out of and what all this whole soccer movement started from, I think it's fair for fit supporters to feel that way. I am very happy that Nashville, got 2 results this week. I wish they were better than what they got. I'm very happy to watch Nashville play. I'm very supportive of the the club at large. I'm supportive of the players on the pitch, but it's a really, really disappointing week, just from a sort of club business side of things for someone who's been a supporter for this long.
Yeah, and I think that's a great way to just kind of wrap it up and put a bow on it. I think from my perspective, especially from now not being, as into the supporters culture land as that I'm in at the current moment. Um, Nashville SC won this week though. Like the front office won. They went through these random complaints that have happened, got through the bad press to the match itself, didn't hear anything the rest of the week going through. And I don't know if we're going to hear anything else more about it and what is going to be changed from a perspective from the club, because you're right, they specifically lied to their supporters and their supporters groups and fan bases. And that's always been it's disappointing. Like I think it definitely took a little bit away from the match itself, but in the end, there was still 26,000 people, 30,000 people if it was mistakenly
No,
announced.
That was
it was a
perfect, by the
sellout.
way.
Hold on, I can actually talk on that. CONCACAF had the wrong number. It was announced as a sellout from the beginning. I don't know where CONCACAF got that number, but they got the 26,000. It was a sellout 30,109.
So
Sorry
they were
about that.
mistakenly told the wrong number.
Like I don't know. I just say it was announced to us as a 30,000 sell out from the jump.
Well, either way, it's who do you want to trust more, CONCACAF or Nashville SC right now? And I will leave that up to the listeners to decide who the most trustworthy member of that group is at the moment. But I know that Valer can't exactly comment on that the same way that we can.
No. I'll comment on it and tell you that CONCACAF get their numbers from Nashville SC. So there's that.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, thank you, Clay, for kind of just wrapping that up and just putting a bow on it. We appreciate it. I'm hoping that more will come from this. I'm hoping there'll be more discussions with the club. I'm hoping there'll be some more answers, because I do know a lot of people that bought those seats in 105 and 111 just because of the fact that, hey, we don't want to stand as much, but we want to be as close to the action but away fans now have the ability and it's going to be different.
I mean, if it was offered as a seated supporter section when the stadium opened, that's where I would be.
Yeah,
The whole reason I sit and where I sit is because I have a seat in
right.
206. So like I would definitely understand the frustration of fans who move to that section thinking it's one thing, but it turns out to be another.
Yeah, and I mean that started the week off, in a very interesting way, and we kind of just went into the soccer from that standpoint. Valer, you put up a poll that I think is interesting, and in the rundown, I think it comes off as interesting as well when it comes to the results for Nashville SC this weekend. So you kind of want to talk about the poll?
Yes. What was that intro? You did your best there, but I just had to throw it out. Shout out to Steven for hosting the show. Anyway, after 6 matches into the new season, how are you feeling about Nashville SC thus far? So posted this poll a little later in the morning of Monday when we're recording this, and we've gotten it just changed. We have now 123 votes on it. It was 122 until I started talking. And the three options are impressed, about the same, or worse than I thought. Obviously open for interpretation. We have a few people writing in and replying with some explaining their answers. About 30%, or to be exact, 29.3% of folks said they are impressed. So or Nashville SC impressed them a little bit more. The vast majority is 57% or 58% saying about the same, so kind of where they expected. And about 13% said worse than I thought, or that the team took a step back. Personally, I have been very impressed with Nashville SC, which is why I asked this question. Because let me put this into perspective. I'm not saying I'm impressed as in like they are getting the best results they can get or whatever. I'm just saying I'm impressed as in this is much better than I expected and anticipated for this team this year. Maybe I had a pessimistic look in the beginning of the season, possibly. But after what we saw last season and the moves that they made, which were positive for the most part, I just didn't expect them to look this good on the pitch. I think there's a lot of positives to draw from it. And I'll reiterate the point I said in my instant reaction, in that I think I have way more faith in Gary Smith and Nashville SC to fix defense than offense. And the fact that the offense is somewhat working at the moment makes me think that they'll be able to figure out the defense and have a good team going forward.
So I feel about the same as I did before the season started, which is I think that they're a good team, but not a great team. The results kind of bear that out a little bit. But when you take into account the number of injuries and the fact that they basically haven't had Hani Mukhtar for half of the matches, haven't had Sam Surridge for, much time at all. Now Walker Zimmerman's out injured. He was also like coming back from injury. So like on the basis of like what has gone on, I think it's hard to not come away feeling pretty all right. In the rundown, I said, is it possible to feel so much better about NSC after the last week, a week where they played 2 games and didn't win either of them? And I really do feel a lot better about NSC coming out of this week, even with two blown 2-0 leads, which has only really happened, I think, one other time in MLS for Gary Smith, and that was Portland. I do, I think that that is a concern, but what we said on this very show 2 months ago and took a little bit of stick, Valer and I did on this, even I don't think you were on this episode, was that we both said that this Nashville SC team is so much deeper than Nashville SC has felt in recent years. And I think the results have borne that out. I think especially coming out of the LA Galaxy game, nobody, not a single person in that Nashville SC stadium, like would have anticipated having a 2-goal lead at any point in that game once they saw the lineup. Like, and if anyone says they were, they're lying to you. Because I saw a lot of defeatism when that lineup went out, and I think that that speaks to the huge difference in what's available to Gary Smith and the staff off the bench and in reserve roles compared to a year ago, and certainly compared to 2 years ago.
Yeah, I think it's interesting the way that the team was definitely able to rotate the squad. On Sunday, just the way that they were able to have 10 different starters on Sunday compare. I think it shows. And I don't think Gary would put that lineup specifically out there if there wasn't a trust to do it. Um I'm feeling the same, if not a little more scared, actually. And it it's like one of those things where like when players get the yips or something like that, where they lose one part of their game, like their game another, all that type of stuff. Where it's great. I love the fact that we're playing a little bit better offensively, especially against Miami, against the Galaxy. We showed that we can control a game and do well. We have to control the game for 90 minutes, and we have to continue to do that for 90 minutes. And that is something that Nashville's always been able to do. There were some problem times when we weren't able to do that. I believe it was not last year, but it was the year before. But we had some tough times trying to close out like some of those matches, and it really stung us in the back. And that's why I'm a little bit more concerned, because the defensive closing out of games has never been something that has always been kind of an issue. And now we don't know what's going to happen with Walker's injury. I don't necessarily know who's going to be confidently in that second center back spot. I don't know how well these guys are going to be working together in that way. What if we get another injury? I think it's going to be interesting on how the closing of games is going to be addressed by Gary Smith.
I completely understand that point. I will also just point out that it's a little bit different closing a game against a lot of teams in MLS and closing a game against Lionel Messi, Luis Suarez, and Ricky Puig. So I do think that understandably you expect Nashville to maintain a two-goal lead at the same time, especially with Messi and Puig. You're talking about two players that are better by a considerable margin than a lot of people are playing in the same role for most MLS teams. And I just think that that's worth considering.
No, it is. And I think it's absolutely worth considering. But I will say I've also seen this team shut down both Lionel Messi and Ricky Puig. I've seen them both do it.
Well, actually, Galaxy got a late equalizer last year. Do you remember that? Ricky Puig penalty, I'm pretty sure, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was that. Actually, I didn't even think about that. That was the same thing. But they did keep Messi to no goals in Miami or Fort Lauderdale. Steven, you know what never concerns me? I know you're concerned about this, but you know what never concerns me?
What never concerns you, Valer?
Our Patreon members.
Hey!
They're the best people out there. And we were happy to welcome in another Patreon member. And guys, another Brian joined the Patreon. I honestly, I don't know if there's something going on, but the Brian's committee, the larger Brian committee, loves the Patreon. So thank you to Brian for joining in last week. Really appreciate you. Shout out to you. Thank you to everybody who have joined our Patreon. For the folks who've been here since the day one we announced the Patreon, to Brian, who just joined in last week. We really appreciate you. Your financial support is very, very, very much appreciated by this show, and it keeps us going and keeps us giving this content to you on a weekly basis and sometimes more even. So thank you for joining, Brian. Be like Brian, join our Patreon. It's only $5 a month, but it means the world to us. So yeah, thank you.
Don't worry, Brian. You may be like the fifth Brian that has joined our Patreon, but you are currently first in our hearts.
We don't have a starting 11 of Brian's yet. And so if your name's Brian and you're listening, make sure you get out there and join our starting 11.
All right, and we still have a lot to talk about this episode, so we're gonna get into that. We're gonna talk about the Miami match here first coming up, talk about the Galaxy a little bit later, of course. And yeah, we'll get into it right here next on Pharmaceutical Soccer. And we're back here on Pharmaceutical Soccer. It's so good to be here with Valère. I'm excited to talk about this. Not as good as just Clay's on another level this morning. I don't really know what's happening at the current
Great
moment.
intro, Steven.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. At PharmaSoccer on our Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And of course, you can follow us on our Patreon, as we talked about in the first segment. Please be like Brian and all of the Brians. Please help support the show. We really appreciate it. Helps keep the lights on, all that fun stuff. And again, you may be able to see Clay sing karaoke on our Patreon. So now I'm just going to keep dropping that because he's going to ruin my vibe. It's perfectly fine, Clay.
If you get me singing karaoke on there, we're renaming it to the Claytreon. That's all I'm saying.
That's a fair. That's a fair exchange.
A tech company.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see this. Let's do it. Anyway, go ahead, Steven.
Anyways, look, we do need to talk about first the Miami match coming up this Wednesday, which has to talk about the match last week as well, where Nashville SC definitely put out a pretty strong starting lineup for that Miami match, as we weren't necessarily considering them having the Champions Cup be up there when it comes to priority, but just the way the week kind of unfolded with Hani in the starting 11, very strong lineup indeed to start off this week.
Yeah, I think a lot of people saw Nashville's injuries and maybe just figured it was a good time to take a punt on Champions Cup. And I was really, really excited about the fact that they did not. I've said it on this show 1,000 times. You never know when you're going to be in this position again. You do know that you can play for MLS playoffs till pretty late in the season because of how many teams make it. But you never know when you're going to get a chance for Champions Cup. We've been talking about making Champions League on this show every year that it's been around. And this is the first chance, and this is 6 years in. So you never know when you're going to get a chance to play it again. And the fact that Nashville said, hey, it's a home game. We don't care that it's, Lionel Messi. We don't care that it's Luis Suarez. We don't care that they're definitely favored in this matchup. We're going to put out our best effort and see what happens. Because if they keep it close, they can take it to the second leg. Who knows what happens in the second leg? And I was so excited when I saw that was what the lineup was going to be. And fortunately, they put in a good showing.
Yeah, and that lineup took it to Miami with an unlikely hero.
Yeah, I mean, for one thing you can't say about Nashville SC, which you can say about almost every single team who has played Inter Miami, is that there's definitely doubt and maybe you play a little scared. Nashville SC, that's not their MO. That's if there's something that this team excels in is not playing scared and not being able to being able to channel in their best, especially when they're the underdogs. And we talked about this so many times already. I think the match in itself should have gone so much better. In all honesty, Nashville SC were the better side. Miami had the ball. Miami had double or triple the passes Nashville SC had. But overall, I think Nashville SC had the chances. And I think for Nashville to come out with just 2 goals, again, I understand that I'm saying 2 goals but honestly, it could have easily been 3, 4, and even 5. And I think when you talk about a team like Nashville SC that struggled so much to create anything last season, to even create a goal opportunity, and going from that to what they did to Miami, I think it's a and to the LA Galaxy, to be fair, I think it's a really, really positive step, and I think it reflected in the players and Gary Smith.
Yeah, I mean, really unfortunate to not be up two players at halftime, honestly. Considering at least one, if not two red cards could have been given to Miami for a couple of fouls on Schaffelberg. And honestly, Valer talked about the missed penalty call online. It's hard not to come away from that game thinking that Miami's getting a little bit more of a runway for mistakes than other teams, honestly. But yeah, it was a really, really impressive showing. I will say that somebody on Twitter said that Schaffelberg was going to score the first one and Nashville was going to go up 1-0. I don't know who that person was, but you can follow him at Clay Lassol. And I think that this really shows. And we talked about some people view Inter Miami as a rival to Nashville, and I know that behind the scenes, at least at various times over the last few years, that Nashville kind of feels that way too. Both teams came up at the same time. Both teams came up with Nashville not getting a whole lot of shine and Miami getting a lot of shine. We've all, especially in those early days, we all had friends in the front office, people behind the scenes that were like, no, we're going to have a better season than Miami. Things are going to be better than Miami. And then that season played out and Nashville won 3-0 in the playoffs. And so I think that, if anything, the fact that Nashville is one of the best matchups with Miami, just generally speaking, whether that's defensive solidity, pace, things like that, style of play, the fact that it's also the team that Nashville has been compared against necessarily because they came up at the same time, uh, really just adds in to another layer to everything we see when these two teams play each other.
And Gary talked about this. I mean, he says you can squeeze a little bit more out of the players when they know it's Miami, whether it's players who've been there since 2020 or new players trying to shine or show who they are. I mean, I had people texting me about this game who've never in their life watched an MLS team ever. You know what I mean? There's an opportunity here when you play Messi, when you play Inter Miami, that is just simply not there within any other team. But I have a little bit of trivia for both of you. In that game, Lionel Messi had 5 shots, which is the most shots of any player. The second player had 3 shots for most shots in that game. You each get one guess. Can you go?
Well, the obvious one would be Schaffelberg, but considering you said that it's trivia, it won't be Schaffelberg. So I'm going to go with Shaq Moore.
Uh, Alex Wheel.
Did you look at it?
No.
You're right. It's Alex Will. Yeah,
I
the
think it was
second
going to
most
be a
shots in the
wide
game.
player of some sort. So
Yeah.
I was thinking, what player this season has widely taken shots have not gone in the back of the net? And that was my first guess. So there we are.
Really unfortunate for him on that chance. Honestly, I mean, it was immediately after the second Schaffelberg goal, and he should have put it in. I mean, it's a harder finish than you think, but still, he should have put it in.
Yeah, obviously, it was an absolutely big game for Manitoba and Messi to get on the score sheet a couple times. His second goal was absolutely phenomenal. I think his first goal, just being in the right position for that, was fantastic. We go up 2-0 before half, and like things were looking really good from Nashville's perspective.
It was 1-0 at half.
I thought they got it before. No, it was right after the second half, right?
Yes. Yeah.
All right. Sorry, I messed it up. But anyways,
it did the same thing though. I mean, it definitely had the same effect because Tata Martino talked about essentially almost losing the game because of how they started both halves. He said Nashville wanted it more. Essentially, he said that Nashville were more determined, and they were. But I don't want to take just because Steven got us talking about it. I want to talk about Jacob Schaffelberg because what a season he's had so far. I mean, this is a guy where all three of us sat here last season and said, okay, he clearly has the talent. It's not even a question. There's a talent. He can do all these things. But can he finish? Can he add that layer to his game? Can he do that final pass, that final shot? And not, I don't think any of us like didn't expect him to do that, but also I don't think any of us expected him to do it to that level against Miami. That second goal, that's an incredible finish. That's a very good finish. And if you look at it, he kind of mismanages the ball actually, and it kind of ends up getting away from him a little bit. And he just screw it, takes a shot. Shout out to Steve Guppy, by the way, who posted something on his Instagram, I want to say, of Jacob Schaffelberg practicing that shot multiple times. So Jacob Schaffelberg does it in practice a few times, and then you see him do it at the game. And I mean, testament to Jacob, of course, for the work he's putting in, but also the coaching staff kind of walking him through this. Because if Jacob Schaffelberg can be that Randall Leal 8 to 10 goals a season that Clay always talks about, then I think Nashville SC will be in a really good spot.
Yeah, I mean it's the missing element, right? Nashville needs another goal scorer. Schaffelberg, we thought at the beginning of last year might be that guy, and then he really fell off after May. And I think that this is the question, right? Can he be consistently that guy? Now, the difference between last year around this time and this year is the style that he's doing it with. Like last year, Schaffelberg, it was all speed, right? Honey gets the ball, finds Schaffelberg, going deep essentially, and hits him like a home run threat, in American football, like, just like go deep and he'll be open because no one can keep up with him. This year, what we're seeing from Schaffelberg is he's using his pace, but he's using it differently. He's getting past guys. He's getting an angle to get a good cross in. Because like I said a few weeks ago, some of those crosses in that Mocha match were some of the best crosses he'd done in his whole career. So now we're seeing the scoring, but he's not scoring, essentially a tap in after Mukhtar did a bunch of hard work. He's scoring, doing it himself. And that to me is what stands out the most about this. And I'm really excited about it. I also think that Miami is just a really good matchup for a player like Schaffelberg, and might be a good matchup if Mackenzie Gaines gets in midweek too. Miami's got some real issues with pace. They kind of always had, but Nashville is now in a position where they can really take advantage of those pace issues, because Nashville doesn't really have an issue with pace. They've got a lot of speedy guys on this roster now, and that can be a real terror to Miami's back line if Nashville is firing on all cylinders.
Yeah, I think the other testament to Schaffelberg's work, and maybe even Mackenzie Gaines, really is the way that Nashville set up against Miami. Because the way Nashville set up was with no actual out and out striker, which was no surprising for most, because the agenda has always been, oh, Gary Smith can't play in a different way. He can only play with this one specific way, and you have to have a striker in there. Well, Nashville played without a real number 9. I mean, Schaffelberg, Boyd, and Mukhtar were the front three. But at any given time, one of them was a striker and the other two were around him. And then Alex Muyl joined that group every now and again as well. So you're looking at, to be fair, Boyd kind of took most of the striker minutes, I want to say, in that game. I haven't looked at stats or anything, but just kind of what I'm seeing. But also Mukhtar was there and Schaffelberg was there. But I think Gary Smith not playing with a regular striker or now striker and letting Schaffelberg be part of that front three, that's a testament to Schaffelberg being able to combine with the other two players without having that sort of focal point, and that he trusts Schaffelberg's skills and technical ability enough to put him in the same calibers as those two other players who are incredible soccer players.
And shout out to Alex Muyl for getting included in that grouping by Valère of Schaffelberg, Hani Mukhtar, and Tyler Boyd.
I was just talking about like the front four
I know,
or three or whatever.
I'm just playing with you. I like Alex Muyl. It's just very funny to me.
Well, this man can run for the rest of his life and not be tired.
Yeah.
Well, I definitely think it's interesting. There's always it's always very interesting to see the way Nashville plays with Hani Mukhtar and without Hani Mukhtar. Like, it obviously wasn't Hani's like most terrific game in a Nashville kit, but he was the one that's like started the sequence for Shaq Moore to get that first goal. Like, it is weird how much more on the offensive side of the ball we can be when we do have somebody that is able to either, get passes into the front half or be able to carry the ball up himself. So it's very good to see him in the lineup, of course, but we also started to see momentum shift in a different direction, getting closer to the end of the match. Obviously, there was another injury that forced Walker Zimmerman to come off the field, which was very unfortunate to see because it seems like his timeline coming back is a little iffy.
Yeah, it's kind of it doesn't sound very good. We're talking to Gary Smith on Tuesday, so we'll make sure to ask him, of course, about that. But as is, he took a hit to the knee with Gomez from Inter Miami. Continued to play on for about 9 minutes after that, and then was substituted out. I have to only guess that it was hurting like hell, and adrenaline kept him up. That's my only educated guess. I don't know for sure. It's not sounding or looking good, but injuries are very, very hard to guess. And I don't know. If you had told me Sam Surge would have gotten minutes against LA Galaxy, I would probably say no. But he did. So, and he was fine. So I don't know. Injuries are very hard to guess, like I said, and we'll see what happens with him. But I do want to shift this a little bit, unless you have more on Walker. Okay. I do want to talk about the substitutions. I think that was a big part of that game because a lot of people are maybe putting the blame on Gary here or even the substitutes themselves. I think there is something to be said about the substitutions and what I saw in front of me was Walker Zimmerman pretty much limping on the pitch, Jacob Schaffelberg out of breath, exhausted, Hani Mukhtar, whose first game back was against Inter Miami, this very, very high rhythm, and he was exhausted as well. And those three needed to be out of the pitch because they couldn't have added any more. So I understood subbing all three of them out and at various points, but still, I think I totally get that. The one I didn't get, and maybe I wish I had an opportunity to ask Gary about this because it may be a fitness issue, is subbing out Anibal Godoy, who I thought was having an incredible game against Inter Miami. And I thought Nashville really suffered when he got off the pitch. So that's the one that I would kind of question when it comes to Gary. The other three, I honestly just think he had to do it. And the players who came in for them, yeah, you can maybe make a point about Ajago coming in instead of Bunbury, but at the end of the day, I think that's just what he has going for him, what Gary has going for him at the bench.
And honestly, the substitution issue would have been moot were it not for a razor thin offside call against Shaq Moore. If it's 3-1 in the last 10 minutes of the game, no one's caring about the substitutions.
Has anybody ever seen CONCACAF Champions League do the measuring of the lines, by the way? I also will never understand the measuring of lines like to be a science when the angle of the camera is not directly on, because you're never physically going to get it that accurate. You're just not going to.
It's using computers to try and make up for the fact that the margin on a camera can be as high as 6 inches. I personally am of the opinion of what is it in baseball, tie goes to the runner. Like that's what it's supposed to be in soccer. But if you're offside, you're offside. And I don't know that there's a good way to figure it out. I kind of wish that offside took into a little bit of judgment. If you can't tell that they're offside by the camera, then they're not offside. I mean, that's the way I feel about it, but that's also a judgment call. So, that being said, like it's weird. I can't imagine that Shaq's was more egregious than Luis Suarez's. It seemed like they were kind of even to me, honestly, but I don't know. That's a whole nother topic for a different day. My only thing is this, it was probably going to take Nashville winning in Miami to win this tie. And it will take Nashville winning in Miami to win this tie. So
I disagree that it was going to
Yeah,
take.
I would disagree with that as well.
I think if Miami wins in Miami, it's not close. I think like me personally, like they're going to be like.
No, I get that, but
Yeah.
draws are also part of this, right? So I think you're just discrediting
And I
that
also
part.
think Nashville, I think Nashville commandedly had that game in hand as well, like in Nashville itself. I mean, the goal that Messi scored was not like the goal that he scored against like us in the League's Cup. You could have literally driven a truck through the hole that he had to take that shot. And it's Lionel Messi. You don't give him that much space. Somebody just lost track of Luis Suarez on the on the backside. Like it wasn't they were just defensive lapses. It wasn't extremely great play by Miami.
I agree. Like I agree on that end. My whole thing is this, like with the calls that Nashville wasn't getting at home, to me, if Nashville was going to get out of this round, they were going to need to win in Miami. And that's the way that I looked at it before this round started, and that's the way I'm looking at it now. Nashville gets a win in Miami. They're deserved winners. They move on. It doesn't really matter about anything else. And I think that puts you in a very good position. Nashville's in a very good position going into this week, regardless of what happened in the game in Nashville.
I think the most honestly, just because you got talking about the offside, I wish the offside was the most egregious thing the ref missed,
right,
or got wrong,
exactly.
Or
and that's that's part of it, is that wasn't the worst call that was made the entire match.
Right.
Well,
Which
again, that's the point I'm making, is you're not going to get the benefit of the doubt playing Miami. So the only thing you can do is win in Miami. That's the way I look at it. That's the way I've looked at it this whole time.
So just to be clear here, there was a penalty on Tyler Boyd, which to me, honestly, I hate making the refs a point in the game. I like to talk about soccer. I don't like to talk about refereeing soccer, but sometimes it just forces itself to be a point in the game. And in this case, it definitely is. Clear penalty on Tyler Boyd. I have no idea how that doesn't count as a penalty. I know they called the offside eventually, which that incident, even if it was offside, which there wasn't clear and obvious evidence that it was, even if that incident was offside, it happened after the penalty and after the absolutely missed tackle by Drake Callender. And then, of course, we have to mention elbow to the face of Jacob Schaffelberg, which was, again, a very, very easy red card. And look, I know some people are listening here and saying, well, you guys make a Nashville SC podcast, so yes, of course you're gonna say these things. But go look what's out there. You know, even guys like Taylor Twellman and Alexia Lawless are saying, these Charlie Bone. Yeah, I mean, these are national guys. They cover the league. They cover USMNT, and they're saying those are penalties or sorry, these are red cards. And there was a couple more incidents where Jacob Schaffelberg was hit as well. There were a couple of just random fights around that just didn't seem like they were dealt with the right way. And honestly, all in all, I can just only hope there's better refereeing going into this Miami match. Because here's the thing, guys. I don't think there's an agenda against Nashville SC. I don't think there's some sort of a big conspiracy to get Nashville SC out of the League's Cup. What I do think is real is that the referees are human beings. And when you have Luis Suarez, Lionel Messi in your ear every single call, if you look, there was a Miami player in the referee's ear, you get affected. And when you are a referee who's used to reffing in Liga MX or MLS, where you're around guys who aren't of Messi's caliber, and all of a sudden you have Messi and Suarez in your ear, I think that's going to affect you. Any human would be affected by that. So I don't think it's as much of a conspiracy, but maybe it's a little bit more of, I don't know, not an intentional bias, but a bias built in from what's going on around you. For the VAR, though, I don't know. I have no excuses for the VAR, because how do you miss that penalty call, and how do you miss a clear elbow? That's on the VAR. I honestly do not understand that.
Yeah, and that is going to lead into Wednesday, where it is a 2-2, but it kind of comes off as a 3-2 because the away goals do count in CONCACAF Champions League. So Nashville does need to go into Miami and get at least one goal, potentially two, depending on how the match goes. And we'll be here to watch it on Wednesday, because it seems, based on the rotation that we talked about that we're going to talk about here next, that Gary is absolutely going for the CONCACAF Champions Cup. We're going to talk more about that rotation, though, here. We want to talk about the LA Galaxy game, of course, and then give our predictions and all of that fun end of episode stuff. So we'll do that next, right here on Pharmaceutical Soccer. And we are back right here on Pharmaceutical Soccer. Hey, Amari, I want you to please cut what Clay said into the intro right before my actual intro. That'd be great. It was fantastic. So anyways, at Pharmasoccer on our Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and of course on Patreon, as we talked about in the first segment. We would really appreciate it if you help support the show. That'd be great. So, look, our match on Thursday against Miami led to a Sunday afternoon match against the LA Galaxy at home. LA Galaxy has been playing a lot better this season with a couple signings that have greatly impacted their team. But Nashville really did need to rotate their squad, and it was shown in the starting 11 that Nashville did put out there. I don't think it was necessarily concern from people when that rotation was announced. I think there was actually a little bit more excitement to see this rotation than there was actually like what is going on.
Probably 50-50 if anything. But I got a lot of what the hell texts coming my way when the lineup was announced. But I think for the folks who have been kind of following the team and maybe even following the preseason to the best of our ability, of course, we were excited to see what some of these players have because we've seen flashes of Mackenzie Gaines, right? We've seen flashes of Drew Yearwood, less so Drew Yearwood, obviously. But I think we just weren't sure if they were sort of players who can start against an MLS side and play close to 90 minutes and perform. And same thing with the defense as well. Other than Jack Mayer, we just were pretty unfamiliar with the rest of them. I think yeah, I think Nashville really being able to field two different 11s is almost in two different games against two of the best sides in MLS and not losing badly in either of them is a good thing. And I think taking the lead is a really, really good thing. Obviously, should be able to keep the lead, but they didn't.
I think that the excitement wasn't necessarily as much. Well, I mean, there was excitement to see the new guys like Valera was talking, but like I think there was also excitement for what rotating the squad represented, which that Nashville was taking a midweek contest seriously, which has been something that they've been accused of not doing in the past. I think it's hard for them to say that they weren't taking it seriously when they saw the first 11 in Mocha or against Mocha in the DR. I think it's hard to say that they weren't taking the competition seriously with the starting 11 they put out earlier in the week against Miami. But this is like a full representation of the fact that Nashville's prioritizing Champions Cup. And I think what that represents to some fans is exciting. That being said, I went into the game very excited about the idea of, yeah, just hold them even for an hour and then get the big dogs in for the last 20 or 30 minutes and see what happens. And unfortunately, that's kind of what they did. But the opposite of what I expected to happen is what happened, which was Nashville got up 2-0 and then blew the lead when the big dogs came in. But there are a few things kind of on the outskirts of this game that kind of get lost in the fold because of the way the game played out. The first of which was Elliot Panico saved a penalty, an early penalty. How different does this game look if Nashville gives up a goal in that moment? You know, matches are often defined by moments. Like if Nashville goes up 3-1 against Inter Miami earlier last week, does Miami score a second goal? I think a lot of people would probably say no. And so in the same way that Nashville got up 2-0, was able to hold them even through the half. Obviously, they wouldn't have held them even through the half if they gave up a goal, but LA Galaxy was very much on top of the game for little patches of the first half. And if they're on top of the game up 1-0, does that snowball? And I think Nashville gained confidence after giving up that penalty and kind of grew into the game with those players. And so as we talk about this performance from the reserves, it's important to remember that saving the penalty was a huge momentum shift for Nashville in this match.
And not just the penalty. I mean, while we're on topic of Panico, I mean, he had 5 or 6 saves, I believe, throughout the match, and 2 or 3 of them were really, really important. I mean, there were some really good saves from him. And again, he's shown himself that he's a valuable option of, being the second keeper or whatever you call it. And that's why I'm very lucky because Joe Willis had a great game against Miami just 3 days before that, so you're looking at two very good goalkeepers. Obviously, Joe Willis is older and if the natural progression was to go, then Panico will take over for Willis in the upcoming whatever foreseeable future. But all in all, I mean, Nashville are very, very lucky. There are not that many teams in MLS where they can put on their second keeper and have that sort of performance come through.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think it showed that he did get man of the match from the fans and from the play, like from everybody from Nashville itself. I definitely think there is a little bit more to be desired from the center back pairing against the LA Galaxy. I have my own personal thoughts about that in some way. I definitely think there's a reason why Brett Kelman probably wasn't picked up by a lot of teams. I'm just going to say that out loud. But I mean, there were some players that really did take the opportunity, this opportunity, and they took it extremely seriously. I think if you look at players like, I mean, Taylor Washington had potentially one of the best games I've ever seen him play in a Nashville kit on Sunday against the Galaxy. He was one of the reasons we were able to get that penalty. It too, like again, and then Drew Yearwood finishing it, which leads to how well Drew Yearwood played on Sunday as well. I think there's so many positives from this rotation of squad that it just confirms again that what you two have talked about. This depth is there, and
Yeah.
it's great to see.
Yeah, and it's clearly that, like, especially in Yearwood, and I'll go ahead and say Anunga as well, because they both were really good partnership. I thought it worked out really well, where Yearwood would push a little higher, and Anunga would stay back, and they both were doing really well and really good stuff. And Anunga was going forward and passing the ball forward and dribbling past players, which was a little surprising to see. But I think it shows development, because you bring a player in from the USL level and year after year playing at MLS level, year after year under MLS coaching, and you do see improvements. Now that doesn't mean Anunga is going to start every single game for Nashville SC, but I do think it gives Gary Smith a little bit of a headache, because you have Drew Yearwood, Brian Anunga, Sean Davis, and Anibal Godoy. Sean Davis and Anibal Godoy had a really good game against Miami. Anunga and Drew Yearwood had a really good game against Galaxy. So now you're looking at 4 players for 2 positions, and all 4 of them are, I think, in form or close to it. If not in form, performing well. Let's just put it that way. So I think it's a little bit, that is exactly what you want. And that I wrote an article about this at the end of last season, actually, where Nashville just had no second option players. They had all the starters, great, all of them were starting, but nobody was challenging those starters for 4 minutes. Nobody was realistically challenging those starters for that spot. And now they have that cooking. They have not only in midfield, they have it cooking at the center back position. I will actually, Stephen, I will disagree with you on Brett Kelman. I think he had a really good game, and I think he played really well. And even Gary Smith was very praised him pretty well. Praised him for a good bit as well. And then I think on the other end you have Jack Mayer, who was a little shaky. Not gonna lie, was a little shaky to start the game, but I think played into it a little bit. There were individual mistakes. I don't want to take that away from anybody, but I think at the same time, as a defensive unit who's played with each other for the first time ever, and all the changes offensively and in midfield that came on after the 60th and 70th minute, I think you can't have that many complaints. I do want to talk about every single player on the pitch, but I'm gonna pass it to Clay because I've been talking for a minute.
Well, no, I was just going to echo the Coleman shout from you. There were a couple of, especially in the first half, there were a couple of, or I guess it wasn't the first half. I guess it would have been the second half that I really noticed him, because I was sitting in club seats, so I had a different angle than I normally have, and there were a few on our side of the field, Valera, since I was right under you, that I really noticed Coleman, and in a good way, and like snuffing out some chances and things like that. I thought the back five was an inspired decision, especially considering that it was Bauer and Coleman going out there with Mayer, which that was the part that made me kind of queasy about the lineup. But I think it mostly came off pretty well, and I I do have a few takeaways that I found particularly interesting, which is you kind of hinted at it there with Anunga going forward. It felt like a midfield that was way more forward thinking than we would normally expect, especially in this sort of game where it is all reserves. And, we all three of us saw the lineup and we're like, all right, scoreless draw, we'll take it. Give us a scoreless draw, we'll go home, get the point, move on. And I think seeing the midfield pushing and trying to move forward. I mean, I believe that your colleague Blair Ben had cut the particular sequence of plays that where it was Anunga being creative with the ball at his
Wait, I
feet.
did that.
You did that?
Maybe he did it too. I don't
Okay.
know. I did
Well,
that.
either way,
Give
you
Valera
both did
credit
it.
for his work, Clay. Jeez.
I didn't see it from Blair. I was trying to give credit to the person I saw it from. So my apologies.
All good, all good.
But
Ben deserves it.
but
Whatever.
either way, that's something that we haven't seen from him. We have seen little flashes of Anunga, thinking offensively, which he kind of gets a lot of flack for not being that sort of player. But this, we've heard Gary Smith talk about, a stylistic change, a different style that he's going to be bringing. And I think that the Galaxy game is actually a pretty good example of what he's talking about from his midfield because I think we saw a lot more midfielders moving with the ball at their feet, trying to do stuff with the ball at their field, with the ball at their feet. We haven't totally seen it in these kind of games in the past, and I found it very interesting and made me kind of excited for a time when there wasn't going to be fixture congestion later in the season.
Yeah, and while we're in the topic of reserves coming in and performing well, I think we've all said it at a certain point in this show or last show, but Mackenzie Gaines looks really, really good. I think when you look at him and who he replaced in the squad, he effectively replaced um, Luke Hawkinson, which no offense to Luke or anything like that, but there is a different quality when Mackenzie Gaines is on the pitch, especially going forward. I think I don't mean this to be disrespectful or anything, but it's just the way Mackenzie Gaines plays the game is very similar to Jacob Schaffelberg, which is what Nashville needs and Nashville needed because Mackenzie Gaines effectively replaces Jacob Schaffelberg whenever Jacob is hurt or hopefully just tired.
Right.
And I think that competition is starting to build up a little bit between the two, and maybe even see them both play with each other, which we only saw once really against Mocha. I don't think we'll see a lot of both of them playing with each other unless Nashville is chasing the game, which from minute one against Miami, they will be chasing the game. So that's a little bit different than usual for Nashville SC. And then I do want to say one last thing about Teal Bunbury, and then we can move on. But Teal Bunbury, 2 goals in 2 games now. I know they're both penalties, but trust me, if you are a fan of Nashville SC or at least watch Nashville SC, penalties don't get scored all the time. So the fact that Teal Bunbury can score 2 in 2 different games at high pressure environments is really good, and it can only help a striker who had only 4 goals last season to
That
have
turtle
2
was a
already.
lot happier as well. It was a lot happier than the last penalty turtle, for sure.
Yeah, and I think Teal knew what this game meant in terms of trying to get a result with the team that's on the field. I also want to point out that he was given the captain's armband in this game. That man has had a lot of pressure on him over the last 2 years, especially since CJ Sapong was traded. And I just think that going out there as a guy who's, probably in his last few years of playing professionally, taking the captain's armband, taking penalties, getting results when a lot of people don't think he's up to it. I mean, is there anything that's more defined playing for Nashville than that? Like that is exactly what you want. At least from an intangible standpoint, that is exactly what you want from a Nashville SC player, especially reserve. And as I'm so happy for him. I that's a guy who needs a few feathers in his cap because he's had to work very hard this season with what's been put in front of him, and it hasn't always come off, and so getting a couple penalties, hopefully getting a little bit of confidence back, that's exactly what a starting strike or what a backup striker, but who has been a starting striker this year needs, going into the rest of the season.
Yeah, and unfortunately, a bad giveaway in the second half led to Ricky Pooch just doing Ricky Pooch things, and then I don't even remember the second. I know Joveljic scored it, but I don't even remember it. I have a question
The
for you
the
guys.
bad giveaway was not from Teal Bunbury though. right? Okay.
No.
Yeah. Okay. I was gonna. It just. I was like, wait. You still
You know,
No,
agree
that
with that?
it was
Okay.
just a bad giveaway. I think there was three midfielders that gave that
Yes.
ball
Yeah. Yeah.
away.
Okay.
It was a
Yeah.
multi
Okay.
giveaway.
I remember.
literally watching the game, I saw the giveaway and then I saw it go through two. And then as it went through there, I was like, this is bad, guys. And then, like
It's
immediately
not
gives
just
up the
one,
Great
ball.
it's
analysis.
two. Where it did seem like three points at the beginning of the match seemed unlikely, turned into it really felt like 2 points lost at the end of that match for sure. You could definitely feel the momentum turn, but it is weird with, bringing the big guns on as you are there. Were you more concerned with these subs coming in on Sunday compared to the Thursday match, or were you kind of expecting that to happen?
I was expecting. I was fully expecting. There's no way Hani Mukhtar is gonna not take the chance of running against defenders who've been running for 70 minutes while he's fresh off the bench. I don't think he would have let that happen. I think he would have thrown a fit if he didn't get on the pitch. So just knowing who he is, he definitely was looking for that chance. And same thing with Sam Surridge, who's been trying so hard to get back on the field. I think it was more of a test for Sam Surridge to see how he reacts, which is what Gary said. For Hani was more so maybe he can get himself a goal and get there. I don't think the issue is that, they put the starters in and now all of a sudden Nashville conceded. I don't think it's as easy as that. I don't think that explains it. I think there was just Nashville in its nature concedes the ball a lot. And when your back line's playing with each other for the first time ever, and you just get attack after attack after attack from the LA Galaxy, something's got to give. And unfortunately, it was a pretty easy, avoidable goal, I should say, that they gave up.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of chemistry that's trying to be developed in this game, and that actually leads in to the Hani point I was going to make, and like getting Surge, Boyd, and Hani minutes together in a meaningful game is the most important thing that came out of this game, other than finding out that your reserves can play a little bit. Like it's up there. If Nashville's going to have a successful year, if they're going to have a successful Champions Cup run, if they're going to get success in any way whatsoever, those three guys need to be playing with each other and knowing how the other is going to react. And I was so excited because I think Boyd's first touch was a takeaway. He makes an interception going upfield and just didn't quite have the timing right for Honey. So a goal that was rightly ruled offside. He was about a step off, but that's the type of stuff that we'll see, get tightened up as these guys play with each other more. And so we can talk about the lack of chemistry or building of chemistry rather on the back line, but building the chemistry at the front of Nashville's attack is what is very important right now. And so getting Surge out there, super important. Getting Hani out there, obviously important, but getting Boyd out there with them. And it's unfortunate Boyd couldn't score a winner against his old club. That's everyone always roots for.
Yeah, and building on that chemistry we have this week coming up, where Nashville does go into Miami on Wednesday, where it does look like they will put more of a starting, big gun lineup to try and get the win in Miami. If you do not know, Miami does have the advantage based on away goals at the current moment. So it is a 2-2, but Miami say it would finish 0-0. Miami would move on.
Yeah,
And
any team who wins that match moves on. But if there is a draw, anything that's 0-0 or 1-1 would result in a Miami advancing. 2-2 would result to go into extra time and penalties. And anything higher draws wise would be Nashville SC would be moving through. So that's how away goals work, which is kind of stupid, but that's just how it works. And CONCACAF insists on having them. For the upcoming game, Messi was sorry, for the weekend game, Messi was listed on the injury list. He was listed as questionable. We don't know if he's going to be back. Tata Martino talks to the media on Tuesday, right after Gary Smith, actually. So you'll be able to maybe hear something on Messi's injury, or maybe he was just resting him. No one knows. Alba is back. He was sick for the Nashville match, so he didn't get to play. So that's a big piece for Nashville SC. And Miami did end up rotating just as much as Nashville almost on Sunday. They did lose their home game to Montreal 3-2. So Nashville were able to get a point where Miami were not able to. They both played at home. Obviously, now Nashville has to travel. And that just adds more to the fire of between those two teams. And every time those two teams have played, we've done a good match, I want to say, or at least an entertaining one. So we'll see where this goes
And
on
Jordi
Wednesday.
Alba scored a banger too against Montreal as well. And I mean, obviously, his chemistry with Messi is different. I think Messi is probably playing. I feel like a lot of that is just fluff for, I don't know, they're all mad at Lucas McNaughton. So some fluff there on his actual injury. But then we have Charlotte over the weekend where does Charlotte have their new DP in the rotation for this weekend coming up? Do we know?
I'm gonna say no, but I don't know for sure. But they do have a new coach in Dean Smith. So another English Smith coach enters the league. And this is gonna be the first Smith v. Smith battle of the English coaches in MLS. So I'm just gonna go ahead and say that. That's all I have on Charlotte. Actually, they have a win, loss, and a draw. They've impressed mostly, but they did just lose to Toronto by an insane Insigne goal, by the way. If you haven't seen that, go take a look. Insigne scores an absolute golazo. And they were able to tie with Vancouver and beat, oh my God, I don't know. It was week one. They beat somebody. I can't remember right now. But anyway, they're looking like there are some improvements. And Dean Smith is a Premier League manager and the lower leagues in England. So he's able to bring some stability to the Charlotte side. But they got rid of two DPs this season, so they're looking a little different. But Dean Smith seems to be getting them somewhat on the right track. So we'll see where the Smith v. Smith battle ends up.
It was NYCFC, by the way,
Thank you.
which
Thank you.
I don't know. That's not much of an impressive win as we're starting to learn about NYCFC
Yes.
this year. The league was interesting this year, but we're running a little bit late. Obviously, there was a lot to talk about this week. We have a lot coming up, so let's just get into plugs and predictions right away. Valer, let's do it.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be a well, I wanted to predict a draw for this Miami game, but I feel like now I can't. How about this? It's gonna be a 2-2 draw again, and it goes all the way to penalties, and this time Nashville will win. There you go. That is my prediction, which is wild. I don't know why I made that prediction. And then for the Charlotte game, I think Nashville's gonna win comfortably 3-1. And I think the two goals in Miami will be scored by Hani Mukhtar, both of them. And the Charlotte goals, all three goals will be scored by Tyler Boyd. Why did I do that? I said it and I was like, why? Anyway, I'm committing to it. And then check out at Valer Shabilla on Facebook. I'm not on Facebook. Check out Valer Shabilla on Instagram, Twitter. I have a lot going on with Nashville SC coming up. Also, subscribe to my YouTube channel. I have an episode there for On Air with Valer with Jack Mayer. And then I will have new episodes soon, hopefully. We're working on those. So keep an eye out.
Well, thanks for your prediction, Stephen. It's crazy how you've learned how to get Valer's voice just right. So
Loads of practice.
Check out Clay Lassol on Instagram and Twitter. Check out the Nashville Soccer Archive. I think I've got a pretty cool donation coming to that, and it'll end up ultimately at Vanderbilt University's libraries. So if you want to know more about that, please hit me up at Clay Lassol. If you have Nashville soccer stuff that you would like to end up in an academic archive, the first of its kind around soccer in the United States, around a local soccer in the United States, please reach out to me. As for what's going on this week with Nashville SC, I don't feel good about the game in Miami, but my brand refuses to allow me to pick anything other than a win there. So I'm going to go with a 2-1 win in Miami. I believe that it will be, let's see, Hani Mukhtar scoring one of them, and the other one will be a set piece, and it'll be, let's go with Sam Surge. Let's go with Sam Surge, comes on late, scores a header off of a corner, and makes it 2-1, and Miami gets to cry. And then for the Charlotte game, I honestly think Nashville's got to get a win at Charlotte. I think regardless of what happens in the Miami game, it's not a must win because must win is stupid in this league this early, but I think that Nashville needs to show progress in the league. And a key sign of showing progress will be beating Charlotte. And so I think that they're going to go for a 2-0 win there with goals from Mackenzie Gaines against his old squad and Jack Mayer.
At PH Steven HD on all of the social media platforms that are existing in this world at the current day. Well, not all of them. That'd be ridiculous. Yeah. Anyways, at PH Steven HD.
True Socials. PH Steven HD on True Social.
I'm with Valaire. I'm predicting a 2-2 draw going into penalties. With Elliot Panico being subbed in, 4 penalties to be taken, and Alex Mawil actually gets the winning penalty and jumps into the Miami crowd and laughs at their faces, and it'll be great. But then against Charlotte, I'm gonna go with a 2-1 win with goals from. We're gonna go with Drew Yearwood gets another one and Hani Mukhtar for Charlotte for beating Charlotte. So thank you again so much for listening to the show. We really appreciate it. We'll be back next week and we'll probably be as busy next week just because so many matches coming up. But thank you again so much for listening to the show. We really appreciate it. And we will talk to you next week to see if we move on in the CONCACAF Champions League or not.